The late afternoon sun bled into the crowded streets of Manila, painting everything in hues of amber and dust. Jeepneys rattled by with their chrome sides glinting. Vendors shouted over one another selling balut and roasted corn, and the air smelled faintly of rain mixed with gasoline. Amidst that everyday chaos, a soft, trembling voice rose above the noise, fragile at first, then strong enough to make strangers pause. 17-year-old Lyra Cruz stood near a cracked lamppost, her bare feet touching the warm concrete, clutching a guitar that was nearly as old as she was. Its strings were uneven, its body scarred and chipped, but when she strummed it, the sound was pure, almost sacred. She sang for the strangers who passed, her voice carrying both the ache of hunger and the flicker of hope that refused to die. Wise men say, only fools rush in. Her soft, soulful version of the old Elvis song echoed between the buildings. A few children stopped to listen. A tricycle driver leaned on his handlebars, eyes narrowing, not in irritation but in surprise. It wasn't the kind of voice one expected to hear on a street corner. There was something heavenly about it, like sunlight breaking through Manila's smog. When the song ended, Lyra lowered her head shyly. A few coins clinked into the open box beside her, enough maybe for some rice and instant noodles. She smiled faintly and whispered, "Salamat po," to each person who dropped a coin. Her stomach had been empty since morning, but she didn't complain. Hunger had long become a familiar companion. She sat on the curb, wiping the sweat from her forehead. Her fingers ached from strumming, her throat dry from singing for hours. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a crumpled photo, a faded image of her grandmother, Lola Nina, smiling beside a pot of flowers. Lyra brushed the edges of the photo with her thumb, whispering softly, "Hold on a little longer, Lola. I'll buy your medicine soon." Their small home, if one could call it that, sat in the slums behind the market. It was built from plywood and rusted metal sheets, walls thin enough for the wind to whistle through at night. The roof leaked when it rained, and the floor turned muddy when the drains overflowed. But it was the only place Lyra had ever known, and inside it, her grandmother's laughter once made it feel like heaven. Now, that laughter was fading. Lola Nina was growing weaker each day, coughing more often, her hands trembling when she reached for her rosary. Lyra had stopped going to school months ago to take care of her and earn what little money she could singing for strangers. Music, she believed, was her only gift, a gift she hoped would somehow save them both. That night, after earning barely enough for one meal, she carried her guitar home through narrow alleyways lined with laundry and flickering bulbs. The city's noise dimmed as she reached their small shack. She pushed open the door and found her grandmother lying on a thin mat, covered with a blanket even though the air was humid. "Lyra." Lola whispered weakly, her voice cracked but gentle. "You're home."
"Yes, Lola, I sang a lot today,"
Lyra said softly, placing her guitar in the corner. "Look, I got us rice and eggs. You'll eat ha?" Her grandmother smiled faintly. "You should eat first, Anak." Lyra shook her head. "No, you first." They shared a meal that night, barely enough for two, but full of quiet gratitude. As they ate, an old television from a neighbor's house blared through the thin walls. It was playing America's Got Talent. The sound was muffled, but Lyra could hear the cheers of the crowd and the booming voice of a judge. She leaned closer to the wall, listening. Then came the sound of a contestant singing, powerful, passionate. The audience erupted in applause. Lyra smiled dreamily. "They sound so good, Lola. Maybe one day I can sing there too." Her grandmother looked at her with eyes both proud and worried. "You have the heart, Anak. But those dreams, they are big." Lyra turned to her, determination lighting her tired face. "Then I'll make my heart big enough to reach them." Her grandmother chuckled softly. "Just promise me, wherever your voice takes you, don't forget where you came from." "I promise," Lyra whispered. That night, as Manila slept under the hum of streetlights and faraway sirens, Lyra lay awake staring at the ceiling. The sound of her grandmother's faint breathing beside her filled the silence. She reached for her guitar, careful not to wake her, and began to hum softly, songs about dreams, about love, about home. But deep inside, a quiet sadness lingered. She knew her grandmother's condition was worsening. The clinic nearby refused to treat them without full payment. Every day was a race against time, against hunger, against hopelessness. Still, she sang, because when she sang she forgot how poor she was. She forgot the cracked walls, the unpaid bills, the hunger. In those moments she wasn't just a girl from the streets. She was someone who mattered. One evening, a kind foreign tourist stopped by to listen. He recorded her on his phone, clapped, and said, "You have a beautiful voice, young lady. You could be on television." Lyra laughed shyly. "Television? No sir, I sing here only." The man smiled. "Never say only. You never know who might hear you." A few weeks later, as she was singing near the park, she noticed people whispering and pointing at her. Someone showed her a video on a phone. Her video, the one the tourist had uploaded, it had already gathered thousands of views. Lyra's eyes widened. She covered her mouth in disbelief. "Is that really me?" she gasped.
"Yes,"
a woman laughed.
"You're going viral. They're calling you the street angel of Manila."
That night, she ran home breathless with excitement. she told her grandmother about the video. Lola Nina smiled weakly, eyes glistening. Maybe this is God's way, Anak, she whispered. Maybe your voice will take you farther than these streets. Lyra held her grandmother's hand and whispered a prayer of gratitude. Then, with her heart pounding, she stared out the window at the stars peeking through the smog and said softly, if anyone from that show ever hears me, I'll make sure they hear you too, Lola. Every note, every word, it'll be for you. And as the night deepened, the little shack seemed to glow with a quiet light, the kind that comes from hope itself. In that moment, Lyra didn't know it yet, but across the ocean in California, a TV producer was scrolling through viral clips of street singers, and when he clicked on hers, the voice of a barefoot girl singing beneath a Manila sunset, he paused. He didn't know her name, her story, or her struggle, but he felt something, and that something was about to change Lyra's life forever. The morning sky over Los Angeles was streaked with pink and gold when Lyra Cruz stepped out of the cab, clutching her old guitar case as though it were made of glass. The metal latch was broken, the handle worn smooth from years of use, but she held it close like a piece of her soul. Ahead of her loomed the massive theater where America's Got Talent auditions were being held. The crowd outside was electric. Hundreds of dreamers buzzing with excitement, clutching microphones, instruments, and hearts full of hope. Some wore glittering costumes, others practiced dance moves in the parking lot. Lyra stood there in her simple jeans and faded yellow blouse, feeling small and terribly out of place. She had never seen so many cameras, so many people chasing the same dream she carried from the streets of Manila. A breeze lifted her hair as she looked up at the building. The huge banner read America's Got Talent CISO 2025 Ito. Her stomach twisted. She whispered to herself in Tagalog, Kaya Koto, I can do this. She had sold everything she could, her small speaker, even her grandmother's old watch, to afford the ticket to Los Angeles. The journey had been a blur, her first time on a plane, the endless airport lines, the ache of leaving her sick grandmother behind. But when she landed, the noise of the city didn't scare her. She felt something deeper, a pull, as if destiny had called her name. Lyra stepped into the registration hall. The line stretched endlessly. She looked down at her wrinkled audition paper, her hands trembling. When it was finally her turn, a young woman at the registration desk glanced up with a polite smile. Name, Lyra Cruz, she said softly. Country, Philippines. The woman typed, then frowned slightly. Do you have your confirmation email or official audition code? Lyra's heart dropped. Audition code. Yes, the woman said gently. Every registered contestant receives one. Without it, I can't check you in. Lyra's mouth went dry. She searched through her small backpack, pulling out folded papers, her passport, even a handwritten letter she'd brought just in case. I didn't get one, she stammered. Someone from the production team, they emailed me after my video went viral online. They said I could come. The woman frowned sympathetically. Do you remember their name? I think it was Mr. Collins, or maybe Mr. Carson. Lyra's voice wavered. Please miss, I came all the way from the Philippines. I just want one chance. Behind her, people shifted impatiently. The staff member bit her lip, clearly conflicted. I'm sorry, we can't let anyone perform without official confirmation. Maybe you could try again next season. Next season. The words hit Lyra like a punch. She couldn't afford to come back. Not when every coin had gone into getting here. Not when her grandmother was waiting back home, praying she'd succeed. She took a step back, eyes stinging. The dream that had carried her across the ocean was crumbling right there at the registration desk. Her throat tightened. Then, from behind the counter, a man's voice spoke, deep, kind, older. Wait, what's your name again? Lyra turned. A tall stage assistant, wearing a headset and carrying clipboards, looked at her curiously. Lyra Cruz, she said, blinking away tears. The man squinted. Are you the girl from the Philippines? The one who sings Elvis on the street? Her heart leapt. Yes, that's me. He smiled faintly. I've seen that video. It was beautiful. He turned to the woman at the desk. She came a long way. Can we squeeze her in? Maybe at the end of the day. The staff member hesitated. We're already behind schedule. Then she'll be the last one. If she made it all the way here with nothing but that guitar, she deserves 5 minutes. The woman nodded reluctantly. All right, 5 minutes. Lyra covered her mouth in disbelief. Thank you so much. The man smiled, lowering his voice. You've already done something, brave kid. You showed up. Hours passed. Contestants came and went. Lyra sat quietly backstage, her hands clasped tightly together. Every now and then, someone offered her a sip of water or a nervous smile. The energy in the waiting area was a mix of fear and excitement. Laughter 1 minute, tears the next. From the monitor she watched contestants step onto the stage. Dancers, magicians, singers with dazzling outfits and booming confidence. Every time the judges pressed the red buzzer, she flinched. When her name was finally called. Next, we have Lyra Cruz from the Philippines. Her heart seemed to stop. She looked down at her old guitar. It's wood-worn but warm beneath her fingers, and whispered, "For you, Lola." As she walked toward the stage entrance, one of the crew members whispered, "Break a leg." Lyra didn't know what it meant, so she just smiled nervously. The bright lights hit her face the moment she stepped onto the stage, thousands of faces stretched before her, a sea of strangers waiting to judge. The theater was colder than she expected, and her hands trembled as she adjusted the microphone. Simon Cowell leaned forward, glancing at his notes. "Hello there. What's your name?" "Darling," she swallowed hard. "My name is Lyra, I'm from the Philippines." Simon raised a brow. "Welcome, Lyra. What brings you all the way here?" She took a deep breath. I came to sing. I sing on the streets back home. My grandmother is sick and I wanted to try. I just wanted one chance." The audience murmured softly. Something about her voice, the way it trembled yet carried truth, caught them. Simon smiled gently, though a bit skeptical. "All right. Well, let's hear what you've got." Lyra nodded. She lifted her guitar strap over her shoulder and strummed once, the sound shaky but rich. The hall grew silent, the judges leaned in, but before she could begin, the sound technician gestured urgently from the side. Her guitar mic wasn't connected properly. The crowd grew restless. She froze, panic rising. For a second she thought they'd send her off. Then, the same assistant who had helped her earlier rushed to the stage, plugged in the cable, and whispered, "You're okay. Take your time." Lyra smiled weakly. "Thank you." She took another deep breath, closed her eyes, and began to sing. The first words floated softly through the hall, "Wise men say only fools rush in." Her voice trembled at first, then steadied, rising and falling with heartbreaking grace. The crowd fell utterly silent. Simon's skeptical look melted into awe. How could a girl with nothing, no fancy clothes, no background music, no confidence, sound like that? Her tone carried sorrow, faith, and something pure that could not be taught. By the second verse, her voice filled the room like sunlight breaking through clouds. The melody shimmered. Audience members clutched their chests. When she reached the final line, "But I can't help falling in love with you," her voice broke, just slightly, with emotion. Then came silence, and suddenly, thunderous applause erupted. The entire audience rose to their feet. Tears glistened in the eyes of strangers. Lyra stood frozen, breathless, staring at them, her eyes wide in disbelief. Simon stood too, smiling. That was something special. But as the cheers filled the hall, Lyra didn't move. She simply clutched her guitar and whispered under her breath, "Thank you, Lord, and thank you, Lola." Because deep down she knew, this was only the beginning. A single spotlight fell upon Lyra Cruz, standing alone in the vast echoing theater. The crowd's murmurs faded, replaced by a heavy electric silence. Her small figure seemed to disappear beneath the brilliance of the light. A girl from the Manila streets, dwarfed by the grand stage of America's Got Talent. She could feel her heart thundering inside her chest, each beat like a drum against her ribs. Her fingers gripped the neck of her guitar so tightly her knuckles turned white. For a moment, she forgot to breathe. The judges' table shimmered before her. Simon Cowell, Sofia Vergara, Heidi Klum and Howie Mandel, all watching her with the calm curiosity of people who had seen thousands of hopefuls come and go. Cameras pointed in her direction. Every eye in that room waited. She wanted to run. But then, from deep inside her, she remembered her grandmother's voice, soft, loving, unwavering. "Wherever your voice takes you, Anak, don't forget where you came from." Lyra swallowed hard, closed her eyes, and began to strum. The first note was fragile, like a whisper, like a prayer. The sound of her old guitar drifted through the air, thin but pure. Then came her voice. "Wise men say only fools rush in." Her voice quivered, caught between fear and courage. But something happened on the second line. She remembered why she was here. She remembered the nights on the streets of Manila, when she sang not for applause but for a few coins to buy rice. She remembered her grandmother's trembling hands, her smile as she whispered, "Sing for me, Anak." She remembered the pain of leaving home, the sound of the airport gates closing behind her, the loneliness of stepping into a foreign land with nothing but hope. And then, her voice changed. It grew stronger, deeper, richer. Each note carried her story, every hunger, every tear, every prayer. The audience felt it immediately. The energy shifted. Simon leaned forward, elbows on the table. Sophia's lips parted slightly. Heidi pressed her hand to her heart. Even the cameraman, usually stoic, stood a little taller, drawn into the magic unfolding on stage. By the time Lyra reached the second verse, "Shall I stay, would it be a sin?" her voice soared, soft yet powerful. It was no longer just singing. It was a confession. It was the sound of a heart too big for its body. The lights dimmed slightly, leaving her bathed in a soft golden glow. In the audience, a woman in the front row began to cry silently. Her husband reached over and took her hand. A young girl whispered, "She sounds like an angel." When Lyra hit the chorus, she lifted her head, eyes glistening. "But I can't help falling in love with you." The final note hung in the air like a tear suspended in time. It lingered, trembling, delicate, eternal. And then silence. A full, breathtaking, holy silence. For 3 seconds, no one moved. Not a sound. Not even the rustle of a jacket or the click of a camera. The entire room, thousands of people, simply stared. Then, the explosion came. The crowd erupted in thunderous applause, cheers breaking like waves across the hall. People rose from their seats, clapping, shouting, crying. Even the hardened cameramen dropped their equipment to applaud. Lyra's eyes filled with tears. She covered her mouth stunned. Simon Cowell stood, slowly, deliberately, a smile breaking across his face. He was rarely one to stand, rarely one to show emotion, but tonight, he did. The camera zoomed in on him as he said, his voice low but full of awe, "Lyra, that was not what I expected." The crowd laughed softly through their tears. Simon continued, leaning closer. "I've been doing this a long time, and I can honestly say, that performance was pure heart. You didn't just sing, you lived that song. You made all of us feel something we didn't expect to feel today." Lyra pressed her hands to her chest, tears streaming freely now. Heidi wiped her eyes, nodding. "Lyra, your voice, it's like it came from heaven. You have a gift that can touch anyone, anywhere." Sophia chimed in, her voice trembling. "You reminded us what this show is about. Not fame, not perfection, but heart. You made us believe again." Howie Mandel smiled warmly. "That's why we're here, to find people like you, who come from nowhere and give the world everything." Lyra stood there, overwhelmed, trembling. She didn't know what to say. The lights, the sound, the faces, it all blurred into one glowing moment. Simon looked at her. "What made you choose that song?" She hesitated, then said softly into the microphone, "Because it was my grandmother's favorite. She always said love isn't just for one person. It's what we give to the world. She's sick back home, and I wanted her to know that I'm still singing, for her." The audience's applause softened into quiet emotion. People wiping their eyes, couples holding hands, parents hugging their children. Simon's face softened completely. "Well, Lyra, wherever your grandmother is, I think she's very proud right now." She nodded, voice breaking. "Thank you, sir. Let's vote," he said, smiling. Heidi, "Yes, a million times yes."
Sophia, yes.
"Howie, it's a yes from me." Simon looked around the cheering crowd, then back at her. "You know what? I don't think this is just a eyes. I think this is a moment." He reached forward and pressed the golden buzzer. The entire theater erupted in golden light. Confetti burst from the ceiling, swirling around her like falling stars. Lyra gasped, her hands flying to her face as tears streamed down her cheeks. She dropped to her knees, clutching her guitar. The confetti landed on her hair, her clothes, her trembling hands. Simon stood, smiling warmly. "That's for your grandmother, Lyra. That's for you." Crew members rushed on stage, hugging her. The audience kept cheering, chanting her name, "Lyra, Lyra." Backstage, the producers and staff were wiping their eyes. The assistant who had helped her earlier stood silently near the curtain, smiling through tears. He whispered, "I knew it." Lyra lifted her face toward the lights, whispering through her tears, "Thank you, Lord. Thank you for not letting me give up." And somewhere across the ocean, in a tiny shack in Manila, a frail old woman lay in bed watching the live broadcast on a neighbor's TV. Her hands trembled as she reached for her rosary, eyes glistening with pride. "That's my Lyra," she whispered softly. "That's my granddaughter." The roar of the crowd faded, but the moment didn't, because sometimes a single song, sung from the soul, can silence a world full of noise, and in that silence hearts remember what it means to hope again. The golden confetti was still falling when Lyra Cruz walked backstage, her small hands trembling as she clutched her guitar to her chest. The thunder of applause from the theater still echoed faintly behind her. A sound so unreal, she half expected to wake up and find herself back in Manila, standing under that cracked lamppost. Her cheeks were wet with tears, her throat ached, her knees still weak from the moment Simon Cowell pressed that golden buzzer. Her dream, her impossible dream, had just come true. But as the lights dimmed and the cameras turned away, something deeper began to sink in. The shock gave way to gratitude, and then to an ache in her chest. The ache of wanting to share this moment with the one person who had always believed in her. "Lola," she whispered under her breath, voice trembling. Backstage was alive with noise, producers, assistants, and contestants rushing everywhere, laughter and excitement swirling through the air. But amid that chaos, people began to pause when they saw her, the small girl from the Philippines, still barefoot, still holding that battered guitar. A makeup artist smiled softly, pressing a tissue into her hand. "You were incredible, sweetheart." "Thank you," Lyra said shyly. Her accent made the words sound even softer, almost melodic. Another crew member, the same assistant who had let her audition despite the missing paperwork, walked over, grinning. "You did it, kid. You really did it." Lyra laughed nervously, shaking her head. "I don't understand everything. Is this real?" He chuckled. "Very real. You just made history. Simon never does that, not for anyone who wasn't on the list." Her eyes widened. "He doesn't, nope. But you made him feel something. That's rare. He patted her shoulder and handed her a small bottle of water. "Here, you look like you could faint." She took it gratefully and whispered, "Salamat po, is that thank you?" He asked with a smile. She nodded. "Yes, thank you, for helping me before. You didn't have to." He shrugged lightly. Sometimes the best things happen when you give someone a chance. A few moments later, one of the producers approached her. "Lyra, Simon would like to speak with you for a moment if you're up for it." Her heart nearly stopped. Simon Cowell. The producer smiled. The one and only. He guided her down a quiet hallway, away from the crowd. They entered a small backstage lounge where Simon stood near a table, sipping from a cup of tea. He looked up and smiled, a real, gentle smile that was worlds away from the sharp-tongued critic the world knew. "Lyra," he said, motioning for her to sit. "Come, sit down, you've had quite the day." She hesitated, still clutching her guitar. "Sir, I don't know how to thank you." Simon shook his head. "Don't thank me. You earned that golden buzzer. You reminded everyone, including me, why this show exists." She blinked rapidly, struggling to hold back tears. "It was for my grandmother. She's sick back home." He nodded slowly. "I could tell there was something behind your performance. Something real. That's why people connected to it. You weren't performing, you were feeling." Lyra looked down at her guitar. "Sometimes, when I sing, I forget I'm poor. I forget I'm scared. It's like for those few minutes I'm free." Simon's eyes softened. "Music does that. It lifts us above the things that weigh us down." He paused for a moment, then set down his tea. "Tell me more about your grandmother." Lyra smiled sadly. "Her name is Nina. She raised me after my parents died. She's the reason I sing. But now she's very sick. The doctor says she needs treatment we can't afford." Simon listened quietly, his face unreadable. Then, after a moment, he leaned forward. "Does she have anyone looking after her right now?" "Our neighbor helps," Lyra said softly. "They let her watch TV in their house. She probably saw the show tonight." Simon smiled faintly. "I think she'd be very proud." Lyra's voice broke. "She always said, if I could just sing for the world once, she could leave this earth smiling." That silence between them was deep, almost sacred. Simon took a slow breath, then stood up. "Lyra, I want you to focus on your music. Let us help with the rest." She looked up confused. "Sir, I'm going to have my team contact the producers. We'll make sure your grandmother gets the medical attention she needs. I'll also help you with proper documentation so you can stay here legally during the competition. You shouldn't have to worry about paperwork or hospital bills." Lyra's mouth fell open. "You mean, you'll help her?" He smiled kindly. "Of course, you've already given the world something priceless. Your voice, your heart. The least we can do is give a little back." Her hands flew to her mouth as tears spilled freely down her cheeks. "Sir, I don't know what to say." Simon stepped forward and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Just promise me one thing. No matter what happens after this show, you keep singing. Don't let anyone take that away from you." "I promise," she whispered. Later that evening, as the production crew began wrapping up, Lyra sat alone on the steps outside the theater. The city lights of Los Angeles sparkled like 1,000 little stars. She took out her old phone and connected to the weak Wi-Fi, dialing her neighbor's number. After a few rings, a familiar, weak voice answered. "Lyra," tears filled her eyes. "Lola, did you see it? Did you see me?" Her grandmother's voice trembled with joy. "I saw everything, Anak. The lights.
The song The Golden Rain.
You did it." Lyra laughed through her tears. "They said they'll help you, Lola. You're going to get better." Simon said he'll make sure. Her grandmother began to cry softly. "Oh, Anak, God is so good. He brought you there for a reason." "I wish you were here," Lyra whispered. "I am," her grandmother replied gently. "Every time you sing, I am right there beside you." They stayed on the call for several minutes. Two voices bound by love and distance, one surrounded by neon lights, the other by flickering candlelight in a small Manila shack. When the call ended, Lyra looked up at the night sky. The city around her roared with noise, but in her heart, there was peace, the kind that comes only after long suffering. She hugged her guitar and whispered to herself, "I'm not alone anymore." Behind her, the same stage assistant walked out, holding 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to her and sat down beside her quietly. "Big day, huh?" Lyra smiled. "The biggest." He looked at her for a moment, then said softly, "You know, sometimes kindness is a song too. You sang yours today, and look how many hearts it reached." Lyra looked at him, her eyes glistening. "Maybe kindness is the most beautiful song." He nodded. "Maybe it is." They sat there for a long while, watching the lights of the city. The world around them had no idea that something extraordinary had just happened. That a poor girl from the streets of Manila had not only found her voice, but had inspired the world to listen. And in that quiet moment, with stars above and hope within, Lyra realized something: dreams don't just come true because we chase them. Sometimes they come true because someone, somewhere, chooses to believe in us. The weeks that followed Lyra Cruz's Golden Buzzer audition were like a whirlwind. a dream unfolding in real time. For the first time in her life, the world seemed to open its arms to her instead of shutting her out. She was flown to a hotel near the studio, where producers guided her through wardrobe fittings, vocal rehearsals and interviews. Everywhere she went people recognized her, not just for her voice, but for her story. The Filipino Girl with the Broken Guitar had become a global inspiration overnight. On social media, clips of her audition had gone viral. Tens of millions of views, comments in hundreds of languages. People from around the world were moved to tears by her raw performance and humility. Hashtags like Filira Cruz Golden Buzzer and Fa Voice from the Streets began trending. But amid all that attention, Lyra remained the same quiet, barefoot girl who used to sing by the Manila riverside. She still prayed every morning, whispering thanks for another day. She still polished her old guitar, the one her grandmother had saved from being sold, even though the show had offered to buy her a new one. To Lyra, that guitar wasn't just wood and strings, it was her memory, her faith, her connection to the woman who taught her that kindness was stronger than poverty. As the semi-finals approached, Lyra's nerves began to creep in. The other contestants were older, taller, more polished. Some had stylists, agents, years of training. Lyra had none of that. One afternoon, while waiting backstage, she overheard two contestants whispering. "Can you believe she got the golden buzzer?" One said. "She's sweet, but come on, barefoot. This isn't a charity show," another replied. Lyra turned away, pretending not to hear. Her heart ached, but she took a deep breath and repeated the same words her grandmother always told her. "Don't let the noise of the world drown out the music in your soul." That night, she practiced until her fingers bled. Her mentor from the show tried to convince her to sing a pop song, something flashy, but she shook her head gently. "No," she said. "I will sing a song for my people, for my grandmother, for all who were told they were not enough." Finally, the night of the semi-finals arrived. The theater glowed with gold and blue lights. Thousands filled the seats, the air thick with anticipation. Backstage, Lyra waited quietly, her guitar resting against her knee. She wore a simple white dress, one donated by a kind stylist who'd refused payment after hearing her story. When her name was announced, the crowd erupted. Next up from the Philippines, the unforgettable Lyra Cruz. She stepped out into the light, and for a moment her heart stopped. The stage stretched endlessly before her, and beyond Heidi, Sophia and Howie smiling warmly. Simon leaned forward slightly, eyes soft. "Welcome back, Lyra. We've all been waiting for this." Lyra smiled shyly. "Thank you, Sir Simon." He nodded. "What will you sing for us tonight?" She took a deep breath. "A song I wrote myself. It's called Light in the Rain. It's for my grandmother, and for anyone who feels forgotten." The audience fell silent. She sat down, lifted her guitar, and began to play. The first notes were soft, gentle as a lullaby. Her voice floated above the chords like a whisper carried by the wind. "When the world turns dark, and the nights are long, when you lose your way, and you can't stay strong, close your eyes, my child, through the thunder and pain, there's always a light in the rain." Every word trembled with sincerity. Her tone was fragile but filled with emotion. The kind of voice that doesn't just reach ears, but hearts. The cameras panned across the judges. Heidi pressed her hand to her chest. Sophia blinked back, tears haughtily visibly moved. Then the spotlight dimmed slightly, and the music swelled. Lyra's voice grew stronger, soaring into the second verse, pure, resonant, and heavenly. "We may be poor, but love makes us rich. Every scar becomes a stitch, and every dream that's washed away can bloom again someday." The audience began to sway. Some were crying, others whispered prayers. When she hit the final note, a breathtaking, trembling high tone that filled the entire theater, the silence that followed was electric. For 3 long seconds, no one moved. Then, all at once, the crowd rose to their feet. A standing ovation thundered through the hall. Simon himself stood up, something he rarely did. His eyes were glistening. He leaned into his mic and said quietly, "Lyra, I've been doing this for a long time. And I can tell you, this wasn't a performance, this was a gift. You've reminded us all why music matters." Howie added, "You came here with nothing but faith and a guitar. Now look, the world is standing for you." Sophia smiled through tears. "You made every mother, every grandmother proud tonight." And Heidi simply said, "That was angelic." Later that night, after the show ended, Lyra returned backstage. She could barely process what had happened. The crowd, the judges, the lights, all of it felt surreal. She sat in a quiet corner, holding her guitar, when a stagehand approached her with a tablet. "Someone wants to video call you." "Who?" He smiled. "Just answer." The screen lit up, and there was her grandmother, lying in bed but smiling wide, tears in her eyes. "Lola," Lyra cried, covering her mouth. "Anak," her grandmother said weakly. "I saw everything. You were magnificent." Lyra's tears fell freely. "You're awake. Are you feeling better?" Her grandmother nodded gently. "Simon's people helped me. They said you're going to the finals, my child." Lyra laughed through her sobs. "I'm doing this for you, Lola, for us." Her grandmother smiled faintly. "No, Anak, You're doing this for the world, to show them that even from the poorest streets, beauty can still rise. The call ended with a promise. One Lyra whispered to herself as she looked up at the stars outside the studio. No matter what happens, I'll keep singing, for love, for hope for her. A few weeks later, Lyra Cruz won the entire competition. When her name was announced, she dropped to her knees in disbelief. The stage exploded in golden confetti, just like that first audition, and Simon walked up to hand her the trophy himself. You did it, he said, smiling. You didn't just win a show, you won the hearts of millions. Through tears, Lyra lifted the microphone. This is for my grandmother. For every child who sings under the rain. For everyone who believes kindness is stronger than fear. Thank you for listening. The crowd roared, cameras flashed, and somewhere, far away in a small house in Manila, a grandmother smiled at the television through her tears, watching her granddaughter turn pain into purpose and struggle into song. Years later, when journalists asked Lyra about that moment, she would always say the same words. I didn't win because of my voice, I won because people felt the love behind it. My story isn't about fame, it's about kindness, faith, and the miracles that happen when someone believes in you. And from that day forward, she used her platform not just to perform, but to give, opening a music school in Manila for street children, where every student received a guitar and a meal. At the entrance of the school, engraved on a wooden sign, were the words her grandmother once whispered to her, "There's always a light in the rain." And under it, in small golden letters, "The gentle flame."